Hey, y'all. Getting email development right is the topic for today for Email Never Sleeps. And it's something that I think is really interesting that we've been talking about for many, many years. But I'm only can go, I mean, I can only go so far. So I brought on somebody who, believe it or not, you and I were just chatting, man. I've known you for almost 8 or 9 years, right? And full disclosure, everybody, Ann and I used to work together. Actually, we talked about it 8 years ago at Trendline Interactive. So I brought on Ann Tomlin. She is the owner, and I'm gonna see if I get this right. Emails y'all, or is it y'all? You're based in Austin. I'm not Texas native. So, Ann, take it away. Introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about emails, y'all, and what you do and why do you do what you do?
Awesome. All right. Well, I'm Ann Tomlin, obviously, and I have been an email developer basically since 2010. So I've been in it for quite a while and,
Yeah.
perfecting the art of email development ever since then.
Yeah.
So in 2017, I made emails, y'all. That's
Mhm.
not y'all.
Y'all. Got it. Got it. Got it.
But yeah, I made emails, y'all, mostly to cover my freelancing.
Yeah.
And from there, it kind of just grew
Mhm.
into getting, more and more clients.
Yeah.
And yeah, and it's kind of exploded since then. I've
Yeah.
been
That's
adding
great.
extra stuff to it.
That's great. And, I follow you on Instagram, like I had mentioned before. You're in a lot of different channels. So I encourage everybody in our audience, and we'll put up the deets at the end about where they can get a hold of you, how do they follow you, tips and tricks. But I want to jump into our topic today because I think it's something interesting. You've been in the business a while, I've been in the business for a while, and you start seeing emails come across your inbox. And sometimes you're like, yes. And sometimes you're like, ugh, right? Like what's happening there? And there's this little small thing that's usually overlooked because there's a lot of topics that people talk about in email, but email development is often under uh, under talked about, I think I would say. Why is it important today? Why should people really focus on the development of email itself, whether it's just a single email or a template? So love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, a lot of what I do is one-offs or templates.
Uh,
So, I have experience in both. But the reason why it's so important to do that these days is because I think that people do not have a very large amount of attention.
mm,
Usually their attention spans are very small. So
mhm,
you have to have an awesome email from the very beginning, from when it loads. And
right.
that means not only, having it look right, with images and everything, and in dark mode, but you have to plan for that kind of thing, for images being off
Yeah,
or, dark mode on. So,
yeah,
and if your email doesn't look, really, really well and render, you know, and render it and get your message across immediately,
yeah.
then people are going to move on.
Yeah, I call it digital ADD. I have it. I know. I call it the scroll methodology. Whether you're on a tablet, a phone, your computer or whatever, people just don't also not only have the attention span, they also don't have the patience, right? And so if something looks funky for them, I think that is an immediate negative experience, and perhaps maybe there's some people that'll tune out. You mentioned something interesting, like right from the get-go about dark mode, right? And you get a lot of people asking questions about dark mode and images. So it's funny, I have many email accounts. One email account has images off the entire time.
Mhm.
And I only turn them on just to sort of look at it, and the other one has images on. And I see that, and then I switch back and forth between dark mode. What what is it about dark mode that people are not getting, right? Because I think there's this notion of it's just dark mode. Everything should look cool, right? Like everything should look great, right? So tell me about dark mode and why people should care about it.
Well, dark mode, even though we aren't able to track how many people use dark mode, it
Yeah.
is still really, well known and used not
Hmm.
only in email, but I mean also in web.
Yeah.
So this is a thing that we're going to this isn't going away.
Yeah.
We have to get used to it.
Yeah.
And even though we don't have a lot of control over it via code,
Hmm.
there is still a plenty that you can do to make your email at least look legible and uh and pretty good.
Yeah.
Make it look pretty good in dark mode. No matter what. So there always are some things you can do even for Outlook.
So being somewhat naive, because I don't code email, I've never coded an email in my life. That's not my ballywig.
Mhm.
Um, could someone say, hey, Anne, could I have an email that looks good regularly and in dark mode? Can it go both ways? Like, is it possible? And how hard is it to do that?
Absolutely, it's possible. And how hard is going to depend on a design,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
if you plan for it ahead of
yeah,
time and create a design that works well in dark mode, it
yeah,
can look fabulous in
yeah.
both light and dark modes.
Okay.
So
Okay.
there's still, like I said, lots you can do.
Yeah. And we've got all these kind of tools out there today, right? They've got all these editors, and now we start talking about AI and all this kind of stuff. And I maybe call me old school because I'm an old guy, right, in this business. There is no substitute for somebody that like you with your talent, right? To do it the old fashioned way, but sometimes that's the best way. What are your thoughts about all this new technology that's coming out there and say, yeah, I don't need emails, y'all. Anne's been in business a while. She can do something else. What's your response to that when you hear about that?
Well, I think it's still very important to hand code emails. The
Mm-hmm.
only way that you can get an email to look perfect everywhere
Mm-hmm.
is through a person hand coding an email.
Yeah.
WYSIWYGs just prevent you from doing some awesome stuff.
Mm-hmm.
They have such limitations
Yeah.
because they have to,
Yeah.
because you have to make sure that the person using the WYSIWYG doesn't
Mm-hmm.
you know, uh, screw up the code in some way. So
Yeah.
yeah, and WYSIWYGs are great for in some circumstances,
Yeah.
but if you really want something cool and kind of out of the box, that
Yeah.
or if you want something to be absolutely sure that it looks fabulous absolutely everywhere, you got to
Yeah.
hand code. And as far as AI, have
Yeah.
you ever tried to have AI code
Oh
an
no.
email?
No, no, no,
Oh,
no.
oh, it's atrocious. It's
That's very
absolutely
nice.
awful.
Yeah.
Yeah, it uses divs
Oh, nice.
and JavaScript. So if
Better,
you
right?
yeah, so if you tweak your prompt enough, you
Yeah.
can get it to code in tables,
Yeah.
but it has this enormous, like this huge disclaimer at
Yeah.
the bottom that's
Yeah.
basically like, this is a idea of an email.
Yeah.
You have to make sure to, test it everywhere. You should be
Yeah.
using a responsive framework. Like it goes into major details. So I don't see AI,
Yeah.
replacing me anytime soon.
Well, I co-founded Trendline Interactive where you and I worked together. And someone asked me a few different times, well, why should I go with you? Why should I go from a general agency to a specialty? And the same along the lines of I'm a developer, right? I know code. Or I've designed and or developed websites or print pieces. And my response has always been, let's assume that you're an elite athlete. Let's assume that you're an Olympic athlete and something happens to you in practice, pull a muscle, you need surgery. You're not going to go to your general practitioner, your person that just can diagnose colds and stuff like that. You're going to go to a specialist. You're going to go to an orthopedic surgeon, right? Somebody that does this and really focuses in. And that's where you've been for the last, you said 2010, so 14 years in this business, right? Tell me when someone or what your response would be is, I can learn that stuff. It's just development. It's just code. And I've been coding stuff for years. Like, to me, it's a little bit different. It's a little bit different than that because email's nuanced, right?
Absolutely. Email is completely different than web.
Yeah.
And while web gives you an excellent foundation to do email has so many idiosyncrasies,
Hmm.
that it's a completely different beast.
Yeah.
And not only that, but also we have so many ESPs and email clients that
Hmm.
the combinations are enormous.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't want to equate them, but I mean, like that's pretty, difficult to
Yeah.
yeah, have. And plus these all these email clients decide what they're going to support CSS wise.
Yeah.
So they're all different and they
Yeah.
all decide what they want to support and what they don't.
Yeah.
And so you have to basically code around obstacles for
Yeah.
every single email
Yeah.
client. And that's yes, a specialty kind of skill. You have to know that kind of information and
Hmm.
be able to think, kind of quickly to
Yeah.
be like, okay, this isn't going to work, so let's try, a different structure.
Yeah.
Uh,
I was at my mom's house a couple weeks ago. She lives right near me, and she still pays for her Earthlink account. And so she uses the online web version of earthlink.net to read emails. And so I was kind of bumping through her inbox. She wanted to ask my opinion. And then I look at an email and it's totally jacked up, right? Because it's Earthlink, right? Like, people are like, who's Earthlink? Just like years ago, people were like, who's Yahoo? Oh, who's using Yahoo or AOL anymore? And I don't think people, marketers in general, they realize that there's all of these different, inboxes and how people read email and where they read it and on what device and all this kind of stuff. But how do you deal with something that's just so vast and all the different variations of Android or where people read email? Do you focus literally on the top 5 email clients, or do you try to, when you code emails, do you go as broad as you possibly can?
I would say that when I am developing, I focus on like the top five, but
Hmm.
I test everything.
Okay.
So I expect my code to
Yeah.
render perfectly
Yeah.
pretty much on everything that you can possibly test for
Right.
using Litmus, email on acid, many testing services.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
then and that's a point of pride for me is
Oh, yeah.
I
Because this was
absolutely this has to look absolutely wonderful
yeah.
because
What
it's me, it's my code.
I'm gonna guess in my head what the answer is going to be. But what email client service gives you the biggest headaches?
Uh, that is actually a difficult question. Most people would immediately be like Outlook,
Yeah,
but Outlook has a lot of different ways that you can mess with it. There are a
yeah,
lot of specific Outlook related, properties and
yeah,
such that you can use
yeah,
to get it to fall in line with everybody else.
yeah.
It definitely used to be Gmail. When Gmail did not support media queries, that was a nightmare.
I bet. Okay. It's funny because when you deal, like we both deal with clients, right? You would have somebody that says, my email's not rendering properly because my vice president of whatever read it and she or he read it and it looks all jacked up. And so you kind of go back and you're like, okay, they're reading in an Outlook. Maybe it's an old version of Outlook, like
Mhm.
maybe 0.1%, probably the only people that read it in Outlook because they're a B2C customer are the internal people that read it. And so they kind of freak out and they're like, we need to fix this, and stuff like that. And there's this notion that I have is, look, you want to get it absolutely perfect and right for the top five, which usually comprises of about 85 to 95%. And then the other ones will sort of fall in line. Would you say this is a true statement? You can never get it perfect on every email client.
Correct. You can never get it perfect on every single
Oh,
email client that exists.
okay, that
You
exists,
can
right?
get it to look really good on a lot of different screens, but
Yeah.
I mean, if we're talking about Lotus Notes, like no, just no.
Oh man, that brings back pain for
Yes.
me. Um, Tell me about your proudest moment in running your own company, in coding and working with clients. Was it something that just popped and your client came at you? Like, what's your proudest moment over the last 6.5 years of owning emails, y'all?
Um, wow, that one's actually pretty difficult.
Okay.
Because I kind of have a proud moment whenever I finish a client's email, especially if it's like something really completely different than what I've done.
Yeah.
It's always a wash sense of accomplishment, like,
Yeah.
oh man, yeah, that's right, I did that,
Yeah. Cool. That's nice.
So
So
yeah.
what if so I think there's this pervasive thing around development of emails, right? And it should be, oh, I want to make a last minute change at the last minute of the hour and whatever. And can you just whip that up for me, right? Or can you just change the code and sprinkle fairy dust and it's great? I don't think, if and again, I've never really coded an email. I can get by, but it's not as simple, right? And to just like, oh, move this here and change this there and lickety split, we still have to send it out in 30 minutes type of thing, right? So tell me a little bit about the process that you go through mentally when changes come about or just changes in general, right? And how it affects things.
Right. Yeah. Changes, usually, even if they seem easy and minimalistic,
Yeah.
usually actually require a lot of recoding.
Okay.
So because of how, the structure of email is used, if you want to move something from one location to another,
Yeah.
like, I mean, you got to think about an email as kind of a grid and how
Okay.
everything is kind of locked into its own little square.
Yeah.
So, and those squares are positioned in a particular manner. So if you
Right.
just want to move one over, yeah, you have to recode the blocks to be able to move it.
Okay.
So now that being said, I know my code very well,
Right.
obviously, and
Right.
usually can make a quick change like that, at the last minute.
Right.
But I've been doing this since 2010. I mean,
Yeah.
that's it's not an easy thing for, people who haven't been doing this for a super long time to do.
I follow a lot of people. I read a lot. I kind of lurk in Slack channels and stuff like that. And oftentimes something comes across the board of, I want to get into email. I think I'm pretty good at coding. What do I do? How do I get into this business? What's some advice from people that really want to kind of get into this because they feel, A, they have a passion, B, they've got a pretty decent talent for it. How would you how would you guide them? What sort of advice would you give people who want to start doing this from scratch?
Number one would be, do you have patience?
Okay.
Because this job requires a ton of patience, to
Hmm.
be able to sit there and figure something out and,
Hmm.
to make sure that it looks absolutely perfect.
Yeah.
So, no, quality number one, you got to be patient and you
Hmm.
have to kind of have a mindset of, this is not, coding is not an inconvenience. It is
Hmm.
my job. So it
Hmm.
is not, it is never inconvenient to do an edit or whatever. That's just part of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So those are definitely the mentalities. And
Right.
as far as like getting into actual coding of emails,
Mhm.
there's an enormous group of people
Yeah.
that are always incredibly helpful, that are in the Email Geeks Slack channel,
Yeah.
which I
Right.
believe it's email.geeks.chat.
Yep.
And I definitely learned, we're all community, learned
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
community educated because we all help each other.
Yeah.
So,
And that's what I have found. I think the email community itself, whether you're in development, production, technical, strategy, wherever, whatever you sit in, there's a group for people to learn from and learn with.
right.
And I think that's what makes me sort of stay in this industry is, it's even though we may compete against one another in certain regards, there's this notion of we're here to help. I wish I learned how to really properly code an email when I got into email 24 years ago. Because I think that would have really helped. And I would probably venture to say anybody that wants to get into the business, right? They don't need to know how to hardcore code emails if you want to get into production or technical or design. But you really should learn how to code an email because then you understand, right, how stuff happens, right, is you can conceptualize this wonderful strategy and develop it inside your ESP, but it all comes down to that one email or emails or set of emails or templates, and it's an ongoing thing. So that would be my advice, and I wish I know I can go back and learn it, but I'm towards the end of my career, right? So I tend to focus on stuff that I know I can make better. All right, so we're almost at time, and time flies, but I'd love for you to give what's your 2 or 3 key takeaways that you would want people to walk away with from this conversation, being the experience that you have.
That it is definitely possible to have an email look great in the majority of major email clients.
Mm-hmm.
It is possible.
It is possible. Anything else, or is that like the big overarching thing? So
Um, be patient.
patient. All right. My two key takeaways are fairly generic and broad. Is getting email development right is not easy. It's not impossible, but it's hard. It's hard work. And as much email that goes out across all brands, I don't care if you're B2C, B2B, publisher, whatever, right? Every email that goes out, there are people behind the scenes that are working on that and respect what they do. It's really easy to point out when stuff looks bad. It's easy to be negative. Oh, this thing sucks, this thing looked terrible, this whatever. It's another thing to look at it and say, here's how I would help you, Mr. or Mrs. email developer, marketer type of stuff. Because sometimes people wear many hats. So there's a
Yes.
community of people that can help. Don't bash others. I've bashed it before. I'm not a saint here, right? I'm not, I've done it before, but over the recent many years, 10 or so years, I've learned to not do that. I think the second key takeaway is it's not something that you learn overnight. It's not something that you're going to just take on and go, I've got experience doing X. Now I can easily just do Y. And if someone tells you that, whether you're on brand side or agency side or vendor side, I'm sorry, I'm going to call bullshit on that, right? Like you just can't do that. So learn to deal with people who have the experience and have had years of practice doing this without just saying, I can whip this thing up, right? And
Right.
that I think is really important. Um, so everybody, like we do with every email never sleeps, we give the details of everybody at the end of the podcast. We certainly will tag Anne where you can find her, where you can get some help, the Slack channels that are available to you. Go visit Anne's site. If you're interested in learning more about Anne's services, certainly do that. I can personally vouch for her. You do wonderful stuff, Anne, in this industry. I thank you, and I'm honored to know you because you help contribute to people wanting to learn in this industry. And I think that's really admirable and awesome of you. So I really appreciate it. And thank you so much for being a guest on Email Never Slaves. Any parting words for anybody, Ann?
Emailsyall.com.
Emailsyall.com, everybody. Thanks again for listening. Thanks again for supporting. Keep doing what you're doing in email, everybody, but switch it up a little bit to learn. Until next time, thank you, everybody.